that one glorious word represents more than just the geography between the Sabine and the Rio Grande. It represents a unique idea and way of life. A life of rugged individualism, proud self-reliance, gritty toughness, and fierce independence. That is what made Texas, and that is what will save her again. Howdy, folks. Sam Houston here. I want to thank you for tuning into the Feed Bandit podcast. Feed Bandit is the Texas first outdoors brand built by rabid Texans, for rabid Texans, and all those who aim to be one someday. We unapologetically promote the ideals that shape our Texas pride and Texas first patriotism through our love of hunting, the outdoors, and the gear and apparel we create. Texas, above all else, preserve the tradition, protect the legacy. Check us out at feedbandit.com. And to repeat that great rallying cry from a former colleague of mine, liberty or death. Now, enough of my talking. Here are a couple of bandits that love Texas as much as I do. Enjoy.
Howdy, friend. Welcome back to the Feed Bandit podcast. Jimmy back with you. And on this one, we're going to continue our series on Whitetail Strategies. And this one will be sort of a part one of a two-part episode, learning experience, extravaganza, if you will, where we'll talk about aging deer. And I'm going to continue going through the book we're reviewing called Whitetail Strategies, amazingly enough. We'll talk through that. How do you age a deer, and things of that nature. And then the following podcast, we will have a part two where it'll be kind of an audio version of a video that old Corn Bandit did on our YouTube video, where he goes through some pictures and whatnot showing his opinion on how he ages deer. So in this one, we're going to kind of cover the basics, and then the next one we'll go putting it to practice, if you will. And then you can follow it up later with actually watching the video itself. So let's start with this, and we'll talk about how old was he and what did he weigh. Most hunters undergo a myriad of emotions after harvesting a buck. Unquestionably, the most exciting part of approaching a downed buck is the thrill of counting the points on his antlers. What almost invariably follows after the initial excitement has passed are these two questions. How old is my deer, and what does it weigh? Unfortunately, there are many wives' tales about how to tell the age of a deer, especially a buck. Some hunters, no matter how experienced they are unaware of exactly how to correctly and accurately determine the age of a downed deer. Less experienced hunters believe they can age a buck by the number of tines on the antlers, by the color of the hair on the deer's muzzle, by the sway in its back, the droop of its belly, or the gait of its walk. While these factors can suggest an approximate age of a deer, most often they are deceiving and misleading. Many wildlife biologists acknowledge the only truly reliable and accurate way to age a deer is by examining the replacement and wear of its teeth. Is it really important to age a deer? I think so, and so do most seasoned deer hunting veterans. When you hunt the same property year after year, aging the deer gives you vital information, like the specific age classes of deer in the herd, antler size in relation to the age of the bucks, the yearly restocking rate of young animals, the average lifespan, the rate of decline of various age groups over a given period, whether you should or should not have shot this particular animal, information to form sound deer management practices for future hunting seasons, and how to process and cook your venison. All this information is important to both good deer management and for the general knowledge of the dedicated deer hunter. Say, for instance, that if after aging a jaw you discover that you consistently shoot 2.5 to 3.5-year-old bucks that are only spikes, forked horns, or very small 6 and 8-point racked bucks, with total antler widths of 10 to 12 inches. It should become clearly apparent the bucks within this herd are not maturing with typical or desirable rack size. Therefore, you may decide it's time to change your hunting location. Or, if you own the property, you may decide to provide more supplements to the deer to improve their antler growth. There is either a genetic deficiency in the deer herd or a deficiency in food and minerals found on or within the land. Moreover, if you discover a majority of deer taken are only 18 months old, this will tell you that the repopulation of the herd is occurring at a steady or growing rate. If most of the 18-month-old bucks taken are only 6 and 8 pointers, you may want to leave these deer in the herd. Let them mature in order to grow larger sets of antlers and have a greater opportunity to pass on their genes. In addition, by knowing the correct age of the deer you shot, you can also make important decisions when processing, preparing, and cooking the meat. If you thought a deer was older than it really was, you could make the mistake of processing hamburger when you could be butchering steaks instead. Deciding to marinate could also be unnecessary once you realize the venison is tender enough not to require this overused method in venison preparation. While venison from older deer is usually stewed or made into chili, younger deer meat can be cooked more unusually. Therefore, by knowing the exact age of your deer, you can capitalize on the different methods of butchering, preparing, and eating venison too. For the purpose of judging a deer's age through examination of its teeth, deer should be divided into 2 major categories, those under 2 years old and those over that age. To figure out what category a deer falls in, the decisive factor is the presence or absence of the deciduous teeth, or baby teeth, and the stage at which these baby teeth have been replaced by adult permanent teeth. The number of teeth in a deer's mouth occurs at specific ages. This predictable occurrence allows the aging process of an animal to be matter-of-fact rather than a concoction of wives' tales. Learning how to properly age a deer is relatively easy. It does take some understanding of tooth development, gum lines and enamel, and signs of tooth wear and tear. However, the descriptions of these indicators sound more scientific and difficult to learn than they actually are. Deer are born with 4 teeth on their lower jaw. These 4 front teeth are called incisors. In about a week or 2 weeks, 16 additional teeth erupt, giving the fawn a total of 20 deciduous or milk teeth. It now has 8 front incisors and 6 premolar teeth on the bottom jaw and 6 premolars on the upper jaw. Deer do not have front teeth in the upper jaw. At 1 year old, 6 or more molars erupt on both the lower and upper jaws, giving the deer a full set of 32 teeth. As a deer ages, its teeth are worn down by a variety of factors, all related to the texture as well as the type of food the deer eats. The darker material in the tooth is the dentine. As the hard enamel of the tooth is worn away, more of the dentine is visible. This amount of visible dentine is an important factor when aging deer. A more accurate aging method involves examining the number of rings in a cross-section of the tooth. Each winter, when a deer's blood serum protein and phosphate levels are low, a layer of cementum is formed on the tooth. Consequently, a tooth has 1 layer for each winter the deer has lived through. In my home state of New York, that's the writer, Dick Henry, Senior Biologist Department for the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, agrees, quote, "There are only 2 ways of accurately aging a deer. The first is by removing a tooth, cutting a cross-section, and examining it under a microscope. The examination reveals rings in the tooth, much like those of a tree. It's the most reliable way to age deer. However, because it's time-consuming, it is not a good method to use when aging large numbers of animals." Andrew Burnett, assistant wildlife biologist in the Bureau of Wildlife Management in New Jersey's Division of Fish and Game and Wildlife, agrees with Henry. "We age deer in 5 groups: 6 months, 1.5 years, 2.5 years, 3.5 years, and 4.5 and older. After 4.5 years, biologists tend to classify them all in one class. This is why biologists aging deer at game check stations rely heavily on a method known as tooth wear and replacement. The downside to the tooth wear and replacement method, however, is the process becomes more subjective and begins to get more difficult in determining the exact age after the animal has reached 4.5 to 5.5 years old. At this point, it requires a much more careful look at the wear and tear of the teeth than at the number of teeth. When I, the author, first began hunting, I estimated the deer's age by its antlers. I quickly discovered how inaccurate this was after having the deer aged by DEC officials at deer check stations. That's when I made the decision to learn how to judge the age of a deer by examining its teeth myself. Now, whenever I shoot a buck, I still first try to guess how old he is by looking at his antlers. More often than not, this method definitely fools me. The only two reliable ways to accurately judge the age of a deer is to bisect a tooth or examine the teeth in its mouth via tooth wear and replacement. Period. Okay, now he's saying the only two reliable in the fact of meaning like scientific proof, if you will. However, we tend to also use, you got to judge age when the deer's on the hoof, of course. So you do need to look at those telltale signs of an older deer, and that's a lot of what Corn Bandit will go over in his podcast / video, because you can't measure or look at a tooth while the deer's still alive, obviously. The tooth wear and replacement method can be deceiving at times. For instance, if deer live in an area like the Pine Barren regions of New Jersey, where there's a higher concentration of sand in the soil, tooth wear is quicker than normal. Here, an examination of the teeth from 1.5-year-old deer might look like the teeth of a 2.5-year-old from the northern farmlands in New Jersey. Other factors, found no matter where you hunt, that come into play when judging how old a deer is include information about the deer's variation of diet and possible misalignment of its jaw, and soil mineral content and texture. However, most deer teeth generally go through a standard, predictable aging process. Apply this information to future hunts to improve your deer hunting strategies and help you become a better and more informed deer hunter. A more informed deer hunter is a hunter who gains confidence in their abilities, intensifying the C plus PT times C equals CS principle. Now, if y'all remember back to several Whitetail Strategy episodes before this, that is concentration plus positive thinking times confidence equals consistent success. The other part of the question we addressed at the beginning of this chapter is, quote, how much does my deer weigh? By using a flexible cloth deer weight measuring tape available at most sporting goods stores, you can quickly estimate the live weight, field dressed weight, and the weight of edible lean meat from your deer. Place the tape around the chest of the deer, right behind the forelegs. If the deer has a chest measurement of 36 inches, for example, the live weight was about 145 pounds. Field dress weight of about 120 pounds, and there will be about 65 pounds of edible lean meat. If you don't have a special deer weight tape measure handy, you can always take a piece of string and mark the chest circumference and estimate the weight when you return to camp. And I will tell you right now, I did not even know, I had no idea that that existed. Deer weight tape measure, where you go around the chest. That is interesting. By keeping an accurate and detailed log of the age and weight of all animals harvested on your hunting ground, in just a few short years, you will have an accurate indication of what type of antlers you can expect from the different age groups of the bucks within your herd. You'll also be able to pattern the typical weights of the deer that inhabit the land. Wide variations from the average will tell you if the land is not able to support the population of deer or if environmental factors are changing the herd's pattern and size. Since I learned the value of properly judging the age of a deer, I have become an absolute believer in aging all the bucks I kill. For the last 25 years, I've never shot a buck without aging it. I feel this information is vital to my deer hunting skills. Start aging your bucks and does this season, if for no other reason than to correct your hunting companions when they guess the age of the deer harvested. Knowing how to accurately determine the age and weight of your deer will make your hunting more interesting, and you'll be able to leave the guesswork up to others. And just a point of tip here, we do this when we hunt, and it's better to find a little rock as soon as possible when you get to your deer and wedge that rock into the mouth of the deer so that, like, let's say you're taking it back to the cleaning station and you'll check the teeth at the cleaning station, which is what we typically do. Put a rock in there because by the time you get back, that rigor may have set in on that jaw and it'll be much harder to open. So it's just easier if you go ahead and wedge a big rock big enough rock in there to where the jaw is open enough to where you can cut in there and take a look at these teeth. So let's talk about that. Common misconceptions about aging deer. As novice deer hunters, we were subject to the facts and theories of our fathers and grandfathers as they passed on their knowledge and skills to us. Unfortunately, Many of the facts they handed down, no matter how well intended, were riddled with misinformation. Below are some of the more popular misconceptions. Third tooth. This is a prevalent misconception. Trying to age a deer by the ridges, more precisely called the crests, in the third tooth can be suggestive of deer's age. However, it must be combined with evaluating the numbers of conditions of all the other teeth to be accurate. Number of tines. This is the most common mistake when trying to guess the age of a buck. While it's generally true that as a buck gets older, his rack will be larger, the number of points will not necessarily correspond with his age. With the right circumstances, a 2.5-year-old buck could sport a 10-point rack, while the same buck, when he is 7.5 years old and in his declining years, may have a set of antlers that only have 4 to 6 points, with burrs and kickers. Muzzle hair color. While it's true that the older a buck gets, the more his muzzle turns gray. It is not uncommon for a younger deer to have a gray muzzle. All deer have white hair, which in low light can look gray, on their tail, bellies, chin, and around their eyes and muzzle. Gait. While a deer's gait can sometimes be indicative of its sex, it's not a good indicator of age. Judging a deer's age by the way it walks or the sway in its back or belly is unreliable. Although not necessarily inaccurate, it is unreliable. Let's see here. Let's go on to number 1. So, to tell whether a deer is either a yearling, which is 1.5-year-old, or 2.5 years old, carefully examine the upper third molar. This tooth in yearlings will be partially erupted through the gum line, but not all the way. The tooth will not show any sign of denting, so known as the dark. Denting is a dark, almost black accumulation of tissue forming the body of the tooth under the enamel, making the crests of the tooth more visible. Okay, so if the third molar does not show any of the dark denting, then it's a yearling. In 2.5-year-olds, the upper third molar will be fully erupted and may, depending on the deer's diet, already show signs of slight wear. The denting is now visible, but is well below the enamel of the crest. So it's not on the point necessarily, but you can start seeing some darkness, but the tooth still looks pretty pointy. In 3.5-year-olds, the first molar will show clear signs of wear regardless of the deer's diet. And at this age, the sharp edges of the first molar have already begun to deteriorate from wear and are more blunt than the other molars behind it. The denting of the first and second molar will be conspicuous and will be wider than the enamel of the tooth. Okay. By the time the deer is 5.5 years old, most teeth will show signs of wear. They will have small ridges and the denting will be broader than the enamel. So you see a lot of the black on there. You probably got an older deer and much less points. By 7.5 years old, all teeth show obvious signs of being worn down. Most teeth are in one way or another damaged, chipped, or sometimes broken. Most teeth have worn themselves to the point of being flat, except for the last 2 molars. Yeah, so a lot of dark, and all flat, and maybe some bumps on the last molars. And deer 10.5 years old and older will have teeth worn down to or even below the gum line. The denting is barely visible, and some premolar may be missing. Even the last 2 molars are now clearly worn and almost flat to the gum line. The front incisors may be missing or worn to the gum line. So there you have it. That's how you kind of look at the teeth and measure the teeth to find out the age. One year we were hunting, and I saw this doe, and my God, she just looked decrepit on the hoof. It's like we came up on her, and she was staring right at me, probably 30 yards away, and she just looked like she was tired and in pain. And, they talk about this in this little chapter here, the sway of the back not being reliable. Well, this one is almost like her back was broken. It looked like it had such a bad sway, and her skin was like hanging off. I mean, she just looked really old. She was large and big and old, and her face was really long. That's another thing that we look at is like, what does the face look like? Like on a doe, if her nozzles and her skull's really long, we tend to chalk that up as a notch towards older. And with a buck, of course, if it's flatter to the front, flatter, kind of more circular or triangle, or like equal side, equilateral, whatever you call them, triangle. That could be a sign of an older deer, where this one, her face was very long, and she just looked tired and old. And so I took her. We got her back to the cleaning station, and we had that the deer jaw aging tool, and it goes all the way up to, I think, 9.5. And we opened her mouth up, and I mean, all of her teeth were just flat as can be. I mean, that was like the flattest I've ever seen on a deer, and black, just kind of really gross. And the jaw measure, I think of the 9.5-year-old measure, had a little more bumps than this deer's tooth. Since it didn't go above that amount, we just aged her at 9.5 years old. But she may have been older. I mean, this deer was really old. So it's really kind of cool. Get yourself a pair of those aging jaws, and then when you go in, age every deer you got, and you can start getting used to comparing them and looking at them and aging them that way. Now, what we'll talk about, or what Corn Bandit will talk about next, in the next episode, or in one of the next couple episodes, which will be, again, part 2 of this, is how do you age a deer on the hoof? Because, of course, if you're under a management situation, you want to be able to look at a deer and understand, in general, what age that deer probably is, so that you'll know, okay, we are managing for these bucks this year. We need to cull, certain types of bucks over a certain age, this, that, and the other. So you need to be able to sometimes quickly look at that thing and say, okay, I think that deer is this age, and his antlers are clearly inferior, so let's harvest them or whatever. Yeah, but we never look at a deer or try to age a deer just based on the rack that he has. That can be a checklist point. If all the other points point to him being older, then you say, okay, based on that age that I think he is, what does that rack look like? Is that rack good? Do we keep him? Or is that rack very inferior, and we need to take him out so that maybe a better buck will have more chance to procreate, if you will. So stay tuned for that one. That'll be out. That'll be out soon, if not next. And so I hope that is something of interest to you. We highly recommend go out, Google what these jaws and these teeth look like. You can kind of start to see the difference, how nice and pristine a yearling is versus 9.5 like what I shot. All right, well, with that, I'm going to leave you. Stay tuned for Corn Bandit's aging video / podcast. And we will see you very soon. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, support your local feed store. Oh, and I hope you're having success in this deer season so far. If you are, please email us a picture of your harvests. We'd love to see them. Let us know where you were, if there's a good story or anything. You can email us at howdy@feedbandit.com. All right. You take care.
Well, I hope the Bandits gave you an interesting episode that either entertained or educated you. Or better yet, both. Hell, I told them this podcasting thing looks harder to do than defeating Santa Ana. So if you would, please help them out by sharing it with all your like-minded friends to help the Bandits get the word out. And don't forget to check us out at feedbandit.com and grab some gear and apparel to support the cause of Texas. Remember, Texas, above all else, preserve the tradition, protect the legacy. Finally, as I said some time ago on the eve of the great battle, and I vigorously repeat here again, be men, be free men, that your children may bless their father's name. Well, fellow bandit, until next time.